Greetings, YouTube. Today's article comes out of Canada, and it deals with a judge in a rape case. Ontario Court Justice Marvin Zucker changed the landscape of sexual assault in the criminal justice system on Thursday. He found a York University student, Mustafa Uraria, guilty of sexual assaulting fellow PhD student Mandy Gray. Of this there is no doubt, he said. Miss Gray was raped by the accused. But it was his verdict. 179 pages delivered in a deliberately patient cadence over more than 2 hours. That was revolutionary. This judge is not messing around here. The myths of rape should be dispelled once and for all, he announced the long-awaited end of his verdict. It doesn't matter if the victim was drinking, out at night alone, sexually exploited, on a date with the perpetrator, or how the victim was dressed. No one asks to be raped. He underlined the last lines literally. Does the woman rush to police right away or wait days, weeks, months? It doesn't matter, Zucker said. There are plenty of reasons why victims wait or don't report at all. Does she remember every gruesome detail in a piecemeal fashion rather than a neat chronology? It is understandable people only remember the gist of what happens, and trauma causes memory fragments, he said. Does she lie stiff with fear and not claw her attacker or scramble desperately for the door during her rape? And if she doesn't, would she be disbelieved later? This is ludicrous and contrary to the way in which victims behave when attacked, he said. This is, I think, to me, one of the best lines. For much of our history, the good rape victim, the credible rape victim, has been a dead one. Yeah, society is very comfortable with the rape murder. They aren't so comfortable with just the rape part. So I believe that the reasoning that this judge put out a 179-page verdict was he knew he was laying down case law. Not just for Canada, but for everybody. And that this was going to be referenced time and again in the future. And he wanted to nail this down so it was watertight. And I applaud this judge's efforts. Far too many times when I discuss rape, or I see rape discussed online, the rape apologists show up, but what if they're drunk shows up, which always makes me wonder and question whether someone is really eager to have a partner who is compliant and can't give consent. But in this particular case, I find it fascinating because the two people involved in here, the rapist and his victim, had hooked up in the past. And in fact, she initiated the encounter on that day. But while leaving a restaurant and headed back to one of their homes, I don't remember which one it was, the rapist was an ass, and she decided she didn't want anything to do with this dude. So he started berating her, verbally abusing her. But the rapist wasn't going to take no for an answer. And he decided he was going to have sex. Didn't matter if she wanted to or not. Now, his narrative is mind-blowing. His narrative is they went out to a restaurant, they broke up, and then they had consolation sex. Stop for a second. Let that wash over you. Now, I don't know how many of you out there have been in relationships. I've been in a few in my day. I've had a few lovers. I can tell you something that from my own personal experience and all the people I know, that's not the order things go in. Date, breakup, consolation sex. That's a narrative which can only exist in the mind of someone who really wants to impose their worldview on the rest of us. They're pushing a narrative that only makes sense inside their own head, because they have decided that the other person has no agency. So they're put forth a narrative that shows that that person does what the rapist has always wanted to do, because they didn't actually have a choice in the process, and that they believe everyone else around them will buy that line of bullshit. Okay, date, breakup. Up to that point, I'm with you. I got you. I believe you. The consolation sex part? Now, I've hooked up with people I've dated in the future, but at the moment of breakup? No. Not gonna happen. That's not how it, particularly when the other person says, they raped me. So maybe it is potentially possible that this does happen, but not in a case where one of them says, they raped me. And I applaud Miss Gray for being public about this. She used her real name. She came in. She didn't hide behind using any anonymity here. She did everything she could to make sure that there was a face attached to this case, and that is very brave of her. This is a difficult process, and she will be dealing with it for years to come. And I don't know what the sentence on this guy is. I'm hoping it's harsh. He's a rapist, and he deserves the full might of the law. I don't know how Canadian law handles this kind of thing, but this is something that we need to remember, that these words of this judge are important, that he's laying down case law for future trials. And I'm hoping that people can use this both in Canada and the United States and everybody else to begin to shift our societal narrative about what rape is. And at the moment, it's far too much. The victim is guilty from the get-go, and they have to prove their innocence. And that is another level of awful on top of having survived rape. So I applaud the judge in this case, and I applaud Miss Gray, the victim, because they both have done all they could to make this case a public example of how to handle a rape trial. And I hope the rapist spends a whole lot of time in prison.